the language system of art. So we spoke about Van Gogh a few minutes ago in another one of these little videos. Um, if we look at Van Gogh's Starry Night, probably one of the most amazing paintings. Um, there are multiple things we could find meaning in this. And I could say that there's a language in this piece. There's a language of color. There's a language of flow. There's a way that he made this painting, that monolithic dark tree, that flow across the heavens and the sky, the way the rolling hills happen, the angularity of that little village below that seems so dwarfed. Many look at this painting and see many different things, and we could say that there's a language of color that he uses. There's a way that he does these brush strokes, that he puts them together and finds the flow. Different people see the piece in three different parts. There's the language of the heavens of the piece, that sky. There's the language of the hills of the piece, and then there's the angularity of the little town below. So some might say that the sky is representing, the heavens and this higher reality, then the hills are the natural earth, and then this society where he feels kind of trapped. This is a painting that he did from a view of his window in an insane asylum. So it was a really difficult moment in his life. Many can look at the darkness of this cypress tree, and the way this little town seems like it's being enveloped by the world around it, almost like these waves crashing on top of it. Yet at the same time, we can also see a kind of wonder of the universe and a hopefulness in these colors and these beckoning outside worlds. So there's multiple things that we can see in the language of this piece, and we can speculate what they meant to him, to his life, or maybe they even weren't much about him at all. They were just about how he perceived the world around him and the wonder and the beauty of the world that was around him. So it's fascinating, and we see something different. And maybe it's also what I bring to it at the moment that I encounter this work. Also, that too becomes part of the language system of how I hear what he's painting in this image. So it's quite wonderful, and I would say really quite profound what he's doing. We can look at a work of art. I'm going to show you this piece here. And I found this image and I drew it. This is Ballet Aspen Santa Fe. And there was this image of this, we think of it's a ballet dancer. We think of it as a ballet because of the pointe shoes. And if you look at this image, what I did was, this is one moment in a dance. And so what I did was I showed it to a bunch of different choreographers and dancers and dance teachers and said, what do you see? What are the symbols? What jumps out at you from this image? And how can we interpret what could these symbols mean, and what could this whole thing ultimately mean when you put it all together? And so this is what we got, is the first, this was a series of like many things that people pointed to and found meaning in. And if we add them together, the biggest one I think everyone saw was the fact that she was stabbing him with her pointe shoe. Yeah. And people said that she was on point, which made her, her aggressive. And he was on soft, and so people said that she was direct and he was more passive in this moment, that this was her doing something to him. Yeah. This moment. People said that she was falling unstable, passionately thrusting forward off of that chute. Yeah. Um, People also said that he was vulnerable. He was releasing backwards. He was kind of caught by this moment of her. He was plieing, so he was succumbing. He was vulnerable to this action. But they also said, but so was she. When you looked at these moments, she wasn't just aggressively attacking him, she was also falling backwards in this kind of vulnerable release. Yeah. People talked about the openness. There was something that he seemed caught by surprise. People said she was clasping her hands. So there was something passionate about that moment and that clasp. They talked about the vulnerables, the nakedness, and the fact that both of them had less clothes on, and that also there was a kind of androgynous or primitive or primalness to what they were wearing here. Yeah. And then finally, when all of this came together, people said that this is maybe talking about uncontrolled passion, a vulnerable, uncontrolled passion. That's what this moment, this single moment captured. So that was kind of a fascinating, just kind of looking at what I like about this images like this is I think we get these things so immediately. We read them, we understand the language, we understand the symbols, And again, the biggest symbol here is that stabbing point shoe. That's what makes this more unique. She's not just stepping on him with her flat foot. She's with a point shoe, pointing at him and diving into him. If we look at some other examples, we see language systems everywhere. This is an Alexander McQueen dress. Now, if you get closer to this, if you look at this image, there's some fascinating things. The dress itself, the print is a snakeskin. This is a kind of king snake or coral snake here that is wrapped up, and even the dress itself looks like it is swallowing the woman whole, and she is completely armored with that kind of suit of armor underneath. And these are fascinating kinds of images. Now, this is not the kind of dress that you would wear to a cocktail party. Maybe if you were Lady Gaga or someone who is really making a kind of statement. But in a way, this is where fashion becomes art, where it creates pieces that aren't just about practically clothing us, but they are creating a language system that is communicating something. Here's another Alexander McQueen wedding dress. This is a really, I had a former student that worked for Alexander McQueen, so it was great talking with him about some of these images, and he talked about how expensive this lace was, that it took months and months to hand make this lace here for this dress, and in this wedding dress, here he then put this model with these antlers, almost as if she's an animal, part of nature that's somehow being tamed at this point. And then he pierced this expensive lace with these antlers and these horns, kind of ruining it at this moment. And so there was something about what happens when one gets married and they're no longer they've always been married or divorced after that there's a no going back after that point. So there's something quite, I think, amazing about the meanings of the symbols. And again, when you look at an image, I always say, when you look at a work of art, what are the symbols? And the symbols are the choices. What did this artist choose? So here McQueen chose, it's a wedding dress, it's lace, it's antlers. What he's communicating a lot. And there's probably more that you could see in the work also. In this work here, now you're seeing some kind of early, some little sketches here of my font, and you see that the O is circular here, and eventually I went to not being circular, everything just being angular, with how it was drawn. Maybe because this looks a little bit more obvious, something about that happens with the piece. This is a great piece. I love to show it because there's always a point where if I showed this in a class, people would say, oh, I get it. And then someone would say, what is it? I don't see it. So this is an abstraction. It's just really, again, drawing from and separating down to the basic elements. This is an abstract Mickey Mouse. So is this. Yeah. And you can see that what's fun, if you like this piece, is that we have just moved Mickey down to just these colors and these dots. Yeah, it's just great. I show this piece, and eventually someone says, oh, I get it. This is the symptoms. And sometimes I ask, how did you know? And they said, well, these are Legos, but it's the spikiness of the hair. And then also what they knew was Marge's tall, bouffant, blue hairdo. They know from that. Yeah. This is a great Robert Indiana. Robert Indiana was a kind of artist and printmaker. And he made this stamp for the Museum of Modern Art. And it was a Christmas, it was a card for Christmas, and he made this love. And if we look at it, there's several symbols we could kind of pick out. And I usually like to show it because there's a hidden joke for the artist in this piece also. Because most of us have seen this image before. You might not have known it's Robert Indiana, but you knew the love. And we could say, why did he group the letters this way? Well, often, love comes in pairs, that we pair ourselves off, and in love. So we have those symbols. The other big symbol here is the O. And people asked Robert Indiana, well, why did you put the O askew? And he said, well, love is not perfect. So it's talking about the imperfection of love, that there's always something that's just not quite perfect. And for him, he said, that's a good thing. All right, but also the other fascinating, if you look at the O on the inside, the inner shape of the O, in the art world, he later told a friend that that's also the kind of shape of the male anatomy. So there's something that is rather aroused about art also. And so this became a kind of art joke that's out there and part of the language system. And whether you believe the story or not, you'll now look at the love image a little bit differently with that knowledge of what the symbols again mean. Yeah. So anyways, those are great.